So we've been talking a lot about conjugation of ER verbs, conjugation of regular ER verbs in the present tense. In other words, to say, if I wanted to say, I watch or I am watching television. That's happening right now. It's going on in the present tense, or it's a thing that I do very commonly, so it's present tense. The reason that we have an E here is because je is our subject pronoun, and regarder happens to be an ER verb that is regular. In other words, it follows that E-E-S-E-O-N-S-E-Z-E-N-T verb pattern, okay, for the regular ER verb in the present tense. But if you remember, I said regular, or in general, when you're dealing with language, is only about 80% of the time. So, you have verbs that end in ER that do not follow that E-E-S-E-O-N-S-E-Z-N-T pattern. Something completely different, all right? And these are called irregular verbs. They're not regular. They don't follow that pattern. They're irregular. They do their own thing, okay? Now, we actually have these in English. We have a ton of these. For instance, to like in English is a regular verb. I like, he, she, you like, he, she, one likes, we like, y'all like, they like. Swim is the same thing. I swim, y'all swim, he, she, one swims, so forth and so on. Same thing. Most of our verbs are regular, but not always. For instance, the verb to be in English. Set up our chart. I, you, he, she, one, we, y'all, or you, and they. Now, let's think about this. I be? No, it's I am. You be? No, you are. He, she, one be? No, he, she, one is. We be? No, we are. Okay, y'all be. There it is, gotta be. No, y'all are. And then they are. Now, if you look at these letters, except for the E, are not even in this verb. So how do we know that that's the verb that goes with that? Well, we just memorized it. We're so used to it. We heard it all our lives growing up. It's just easy. We know it, okay? But when you look at it like this, you're thinking, wow, it doesn't really make sense. No, it doesn't make sense. But that is the way that it is. So this is called an irregular verb. Now, French has irregular verbs too. They have a lot of them. And the one that you're going to learn today is the verb aller. Now, aller means to go. And you notice by now that generally when I'm using a verb to conjugate, and it's the infinitive, I put it in the all caps. It's just my way of saying, oh, that's an infinitive. All right? So, yes, this is an ER verb, but it is irregular, which means it doesn't go E-E-S-E-O-N-S-E-Z-E-N-T. No, it's completely different, just like be was in English, all right? So, the chart is still the same. We still have our first, second, third person, singular, plural. The chart never changes, okay? It is. Now, aller, by the way, you figured out that ER is pronounced ek. Aller means to go, all right? To go. I'm going to steal this marker. To go. All right, first thing I need are my subject pronouns. Let's throw those on there. We have je, tu, il, elle, on, nous, vous, ils, and elles. And by the way, when you hear me say ils and elles, that is English. That is me pronouncing that in English. In French, you do not pronounce that S. It's il and elle. But when I'm teaching, I like to say that because it just kind of is that extra little reminder, right? So, there is no rule. It is what it is. I'm just going to put it on there. Je vais. V-A-I-S. Je vais. Je vais means I go and I am going. Tu vas. You go, you are going. Tu vas. Il, elle, va. He, she, one goes. He, she, one is going. Nous. Now this one actually does make sense. These two actually get conjugated like the regular ER verb. So the regular ER ending for nous is ONS. Since I would drop that because here it actually acts like it's regular. So you have nous allons. So this one and this one act like they're regular. What is this going to be? Vous allez. Very good. And then ils, elles vont. V-O-N-T. So, je vais. Tu vas. Il, elle, va. Nous allons. Vous allez. And ils, elles vont. Again, we don't pronounce that T because it's not in careful. C-A-R-F-L, those are the only letters that we pronounce at the end of a word in general. So, you're going to notice something. There is still a pattern here. Do you remember the boot that we talked about earlier? Let's see. Let's use a different one. Well, this boot actually does work here. You're going to see why. Everything inside the boot is completely irregular. Everything outside the boot acts regular. Also, for this verb, everything in the boot begins with a V. So this is a helpful way for you to remember the irregular conjugation of aller. Everything in the boot begins with a V. And here's another little helpful trick on this one. Since this is to go, we're not going to call this the boot. We're going to call this our little car because we're going. Alright? And like in cartoons, when they want to show that you're going, they'll go vroom, and it begins with a V, right? Vroom. So, in the boot, to say to go, it starts with a V, and outside the boot is irregular. Je vais, tu vas, il, elle, on va, nous allons, vous allez, ils, elles vont. Now, interestingly enough, the French use to go the way that we say I am. I am well, I am doing fine, yes. Okay? Now, they only do this for like the greeting phrases, right? So if I introduce myself and I'm like, bonjour, comment ça va? It goes. Do you remember that earlier? Comment ça va? Ah, ça va bien. It goes well, right? But you could also say, comment allez-vous? Which means, how go you? Exactly, comment allez-vous? How go you, right? And then, obviously, you would answer, je vais bien. I go well, all right? So they use aller to say how they are doing, all right? In English, we say, I am doing well. In French, it's, I am going well. And this makes sense because if you want to say, hey, man, how's it going? Oh, it's going pretty well. It's the same concept. It's just a little bit differently tweaked, all right? So, the way that you ask somebody, how's it going, or how are they going, the word for how in French is comment. And you can think about this if you want somebody to comment on how they like something. It's kind of the same thing. So, comment, go, you. Well, we've got to figure out which you we're talking to. Are we talking to a group of people? Or somebody that I would address as Miss or Mister? Then that would be vous. And the word for go, when you're dealing with vous, is aller. Alright? So, comment allez-vous? Now, you're like, hey, wait a minute, you put an extra little mark in there. What is this hyphen? Well, when you have the conjugated verb before the subject pronoun, when you're asking a question, you put a hyphen there. It's just to kind of let the people know that you're purposefully writing it out of order to ask a question. So when you see a conjugated verb before the subject pronoun, there's going to be a hyphen in it when you ask a question. Alright? So, comment allez-vous? And you've heard people say this. Comment allez-vous? How go you? And I would say, je vais bien. I'm going well. Or, je vais mal. I'm going badly. It's not going so well. Right? But what if I was talking to a friend of mine? Then I could say, comment vas-tu? Because I'm talking to that one singular person, right? But what do I need to do? If I'm going to write comment vas-tu, can I leave it like this? No. Why? Because this is a conjugated verb, and this is my subject pronoun, and I'm asking a question. So what has to go in between them? A hyphen. Now I've got it. Comment vas-tu? Oui, je vais bien. It's going well. I'm going well. Thanks. All right? So, and then the words that you generally put with this are those. Je vais bien, je vais mal. All right? And so if let's say that your brother was in the hospital or something and somebody said, how is he doing? How goes he, right? That would be a little different as far as this goes, and we'll just get to that later. But if you want to say he's doing well, then you would say, il va bien. He's going well. All right? So this is your dealings with aller. As far as statement of being, in other words, how you are doing, and the irregular conjugation. Now, does that mean that all the other irregular verbs are going to be like AIS and AAT? No. They're going to be completely different. But for aller, that's how you're going to do it. And there is a great YouTube clip. If you want to look up the irregular conjugation of aller, there are these two little boys, and they sing it to the soccer song, and it works really, really well. I highly recommend that you learn that little song, and good luck. Je vais bien.